The phrase Japanese role-playing game, or JRPG for short, has mustered up some long overdue discussion around the usage of the term. Some developers in Japan see it as a flattering notion. Others see it as a stigma towards role-playing games made in Japan and prefer to use the regular term RPG instead. On the other hand, many fans of the genre hail it as a term used to signify an RPG that embraces the classic stylings of the genre's golden age, when they were focused on the deep stat-driven turn-based combat that Final Fantasy began with. When we ask what Final Fantasy XVI thinks of this, Square Enix's latest super AAA experience and the long-standing titan of a franchise had only one thing to say. I don't know why you asking me this question. I'm a character action game. The phrase character action game, or CAGs for short, has mustered up some long overdue discussion around the usage of the term, because nobody knows what it means. Final Fantasy XVI is the best character action Japanese role-playing game RPG this year. Yes, even better than Starfield, I assume. What's immediately striking about Final Fantasy XVI from moment one is its sheer production value, delivering the gargantuan spectacle required of any great character action game, and of most JRPGs, and of some RPGs. This game screams money, with large-scale boss battles that far exceed what you'd find in any God of War game. When the angelic music kicks in, Final Fantasy XVI pulls no punches to deliver a constantly frenetic action experience that will make you say, "Let's go." Slashing said giant bosses in the face no longer requires turn-based menu selections like it has in the earlier Final Fantasy games. They called this the Golden Age? Somebody's really mad at me for saying that. Fantasy XVI makes its final metamorphosis into an action game with stylish combos and big swinging enemy attacks that require precise timing to dodge or parry. Combat may seem simplistic in the early levels, with just one attack button and one magic button. But players will be combining buttons to summon godlike powers that rain down upon their enemies in no time. Combos are formed by rhythmically timing magic attacks immediately after connecting with a sword slash. Clive can also follow up combos with attacks from his wolf companion Torgal, who adds even more flair to Clive's attacks. Pushing yourself to achieve these quick bursts of magic strikes in between combos turns what could have been mindless button mashing into endlessly engaging button thrashing. Mastering the timing took me back to the beginning of 2023 when I was rock and slashing my way through the rhythm-infused character action of Hi-Fi Rush. That's a good sign. You want that. FF16's combat rivals some of the greatest character action games, but it falters in its generosity. Clive's dodge grants him a satisfying counterattack when used just before an enemy attack, but the timing window for countering is so large. It makes most fights a cakewalk. Enemies really want the player to know exactly when they are gonna attack too, which means any decent player won't be getting hit much. And with the amount of healing options the player has, getting hit has little consequence anyway. The vast library of powers at Clive's disposal, both offensively and defensively, becomes a double-edged sword. On one side, it allows for endless combo potential, but on the other, Clive becomes so powerful by the third act, he can steamroll through hordes of enemies in an instant, which causes some combat fatigue no matter how good slashing bosses in the face feels. These big bosses have stagger bars alongside their health bars, and the player is encouraged to destroy the stagger bar first to paralyze the enemy and rack up increased damage. The absolutely dominant tools underneath the thumbs of the player make exploiting this stagger bar trivial, and the most powerful moves take control away from the player, leading to them engaging with the combo system less. All of this blends together to create rewarding combat that loses some of its luster in the late game, where the bosses are at their biggest, yet they're least intimidating. The entire game is as big as its bosses, clocking it at around 60 hours for me, which is a shame because this game's level of spectacular fidelity is not consistent throughout. For every lavishly detailed cutscene and story sequence, there is a standard side mission that abandons these cutscenes for the static stop and talk found in almost every modern RPG, but rarely in a character action game. This ultimately doesn't detract from the whole experience. I don't need nor expect every single small-scale side story to come with rich production values. But it is a downer when these kinds of side missions start disguising themselves as main missions. I can only assume to pad out the runtime. The story's pacing would have benefited from deleting some of these lesser missions. However, not all side quests are created equal, and while most of their mission design boils down to walk over here and fight a thing, the bite-sized stories they tell work as great tidbits into the world of Final Fantasy XVI and many of its deep characters. Clive is the main hero, and he is the best boy. Just a really, really good boy who loves to help people. So the side quests justify themselves thanks to his good-hearted nature. Clive would be the kind of person to do menial tasks for people because he's just that good of a boy. The supporting cast is full of compelling characters like Cid, Jill, and Torgal. Torgal is also a good boy. The narrative hits hard right from the get-go with a gut-busting first act that sets the stage for a My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy setting, a la Game of Thrones. The personal stakes are striking and the political intrigue is alluring, even if it's hard to follow at times. But do not fear, Active Time Lore is here to give background info for any character or plot detail at a moment's notice. ATL helps the player follow the story along, and it should be a new standard for RPGs. Sorry, I meant JRPGs. Sorry, I meant character action game. It's tied with Pentiment's glossary feature for the I haven't played this game in a month and I completely forgot where I am award. Final Fantasy XVI's story is quite the page turner, until about the 85% mark. Without spoiling exactly why, the dark Game of Thrones-esque political writing slowly fades until the plot doesn't know where to go, so it falls back on basic anime tropes to reach the finish line. Using common anime tropes within your story doesn't immediately make it bad. Many anime fall within these lines effectively, but Final Fantasy XVI's pivot towards the predictable sour the many twists and turns it built upon. So in conclusion, it's the most Game of Thrones ending possible. Bravo. It may sound like I have a lot to criticize about Final Fantasy XVI, but I want to make it clear. I think this is a fantastic game. While it is hardly an RPG, Final Fantasy XVI is a must-play action game. A substantial amount of my time spent with this game was with a massive smile from ear to ear. That's because this game gets so much right that it makes the little things it gets wrong near the end that much more glaring. However, a rocky landing can't crumble the amount of fun I had along the way. Nobody has to be a Final Fantasy fan, or an RPG fan, or a JRPG fan to enjoy Final Fantasy XVI, as long as you're a fan of good boys and badassery.